In a bipartisan vote, the U.S. Congress approved extending the debt ceiling for the country's finances, and it's extending that to 2025. Some Republicans voted against it, saying that there wasn't enough being cut there. Some Democrats voting against it, saying that it went after those who get government subsidies and is not fair. But regardless, apparently, centrists within both parties came together and they approved this deal last night. Not in the dead of night. They didn't pull an Illinois playbook and pass stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning. No, they did it about 8 or 9 o'clock our time, Central Time. So still pretty late for Washington, D.C., but still not in the complete dead of night overnight. But there were some concerns and some rumblings as to what's going to happen with the COVID-19 relief dollars, because part of the provision dealt with clawbacks of those dollars. And how exactly is that going to play out? Well, a lot of municipalities across the state have COVID-19 relief funds. Counties have COVID-19 relief funds. And some of those governing bodies, some of those taxing bodies still have those tax dollars in hand. Well, what's going to be happening with that? The issue came up during a University of Illinois extension forum about COVID spending, and the issue of possible clawbacks came up. And Michael Bueller, he is chairman of the McHenry County Board. He said in anticipation of a clawback, they actually took action to ensure that they keep their funds.
We had already started looking at some of the programs that we funded that may be underperforming and look at making sure that we would get those allocated by the end of 2024 so that we don't give any funds back in.
So they're looking to allocate these funds so that if there is any kind of clawback, that's not necessarily going to be able to happen easily if indeed this measure does pass the U.S. Senate. But we'll talk about some of the particulars of the clawbacks. But even with the questions not really super clear yesterday, I did touch base with Springfield Mayor Misty Butcher, and part of our review of the council roundup each and every week has been how much money the city has in its coffers, how much tax dollars the city has in its coffers, and it's $60+ million, and 20 million of it is COVID relief dollars. And this is all part of course, the federal government's spending plans and COVID-19 relief tax dollars to the tune of like $4.6 trillion all throughout COVID-19. Illinois as a whole, both private and public sectors, got like $160+ billion. The state of Illinois itself got more than $8 billion. But there was billions going out to private businesses for, PPP loans, even hundreds of millions from the state going to various governing bodies, school districts getting billions, universities getting billions, county governments getting billions. So a lot of spending during the COVID pandemic. Some of that has yet to be spent. And again, what happens to those dollars that are in Springfield city coffers? Mayor Misty Butcher sharing some of her thoughts just before they passed this measure out of the U.S. House, and she had some concerns if indeed they are going to go after unspent COVID dollars. How's that going to impact the city's coffers?
So a lot of those dollars were earmarked for the 3 new firehouses that the previous administration had earmarked, and they did groundbreakings before I was elected for 2 of those, and then the 3rd one is scheduled for later in June. So I guess that would be the first thing we would have to look at, is those have not broken ground yet. I do believe my predecessor signed a contract with a local construction firm to build those. So if those dollars were to be clawed back, it would be my job as the mayor to make sure that we don't get into debt for that. So I do know the previous administration wrote a letter to the Biden administration asking them to not claw back those dollars. But as you know, there is an entire assembly of senators, congressmen, voting on that, not just the president. So
do you think that there would be, more weight on if the projects are already underway and the money's already appropriated?
I think it just depends upon how they word that clawing back, area. I've not seen actual, documentation of how they're going to phrase that. Is it already got to be promised? Does it have to be spent and out of the checkbook? I'm unsure of how they're going to word that. So we would just want to make sure that we follow federal law. I definitely don't want to not follow the law.
So again, that's Springfield Mayor Misty Butcher sharing some of her initial thoughts on the idea of clawbacks. But now we've got more indication of what exactly the clawbacks could look like. You've got The Hill reporting that some in the health space, public health advocates, are sounding the alarm over a provision of the debt ceiling deal that could claw back about $27 billion in unspent pandemic relief money, arguing it could have consequences for future health initiatives. So The Hill going on saying that unspent COVID-19 dollars have been long targeted by Republicans, and taking back some of that money gives some pause, but also some a big win, like Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House. Federal COVID-19 public health emergencies ended, and President Biden indicated that he was open to a deal that included coronavirus funding rescission. That's essentially clawing back. That clawback was included in the final measure to raise the debt limits, which cleared the House 314 to 117 Wednesday and now heads to the Senate. According to the White House, some of the unspent money will now be used to help shore up non-defense spending. The appropriations will use some of that money to spread around how they see fit. And we've seen other indication that the dollars are really coming from programs that the federal government still has money for, but the programs have largely ended. So that seems to be where the dollars are going to come from, not the dollars that have already been expended to local governments like the city of Springfield or elsewhere throughout the state of Illinois or across the country. So what will ultimately happen with that, we'll watch and close, see what happens with the U.S. Senate when they take this measure up. But that's a little bit of an update on what's going on with the federal government when it comes to COVID-19 spending.